two-qubit systems and ideas for promoting active learning. So
Awesome.
take it away.
Thank you. So I will tell you guys a little bit about me, which I hadn't had this in here until other people talked about themselves, and I thought they should know who I am. So I'm an associate professor of physics at Cal State Fullerton, which is not right here, but it's like an hour and 15 minutes away if there's no traffic. There's never no traffic. It took me 2.5 hours to get down late on Sunday night, so you know, you never know. Anyway, in addition to being a professor, I'm also mom to 3 small humans who are all adorable, and a really fluffy dog who is also adorable. My background, I have a PhD in quantum computing, and I actually had to go look up the title of my dissertation because I forgot about it, but I thought I would throw that up there. A long time ago, I did some stuff. Which means that I have some expertise, and I took a bunch of courses on quantum computing when I was a graduate student, and then I left the field and switched to physics education research. And so I'm not current in the research field of quantum computing, but I have that as my background. So now I focus on how we teach and how we learn physics, most specifically quantum mechanics and quantum computing ideas. My collaborator, Stephen Pollack, is from the University of Colorado Boulder. His list of accolades. He's a former U.S. Professor of the Year, and he is just a great educator. And I put that up there because he has a knack for knowing the right questions to ask, and he has been a really great collaborator on this work. And we are also funded by NSF. The stuff that I'm going to share with you today is part of a larger project, so I should share with you the larger project team. I want to share my undergraduate student from years ago, Bianca Cervantes, is the author of one of the first papers that I think, Ben, you cited that work. Yeah, and so every time I see someone cite her work, I take a picture and I send it to her because I think she's just really excited. She didn't go on to graduate school, but she did some really great work for us looking at the landscape of quantum courses 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. And then also a team at Colorado Boulder. I'm going to talk about some stuff that Giaco did, and then Josie also is instrumental in a lot of this work. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to tell you about me. I teach a general education quantum computing for everyone course, and I also teach quantum computing modules inside my quantum mechanics courses in the physics department. That's sort of what I teach on a regular basis. What I'm sharing with you today is not really material from any of those. I mean, I probably use some of this material in my quantum course. But instead, my goal is to help talk a little bit more about the content that you learned yesterday in the best 4-hour crash course that you could possibly have. But it was a 4-hour full course, right? So we're going to take like 1/100th of that content, and we're going to talk about it in much more detail. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And as part of that, we're going to talk also about how we are teaching it and how we might be able to do it in our classrooms in a more engaging and interactive way. So I want to say that these things really go together. The content that I have chosen to talk about today is going to be two-qubit systems, thinking a little bit more about tensor products. We might get to entanglement. We probably won't. And then for the pedagogy, I'm going to hopefully try to get through 5 different types of things that you might do in your classroom. Things like pre-lecture activities, interactive lectures, whiteboard activities, which maybe go with interactive lecture, but I numbered them separately, group worksheets, and interactive homeworks. And then yesterday, we heard a lot of questions about, well, could you do this without complex numbers? Or could I skip this chapter? Or should I go to here or to there? And I think no one can answer those questions except for you, and thinking about the learning goals for your students and the learning goals for the courses and the content that you're choosing to cover. And so in the types of things that I'm going to share with you today, I want you to reflect on why might you choose to do them and how might they help you reach the learning goals that you have set for your students. And I think that maybe most of us who teach sometimes don't do as well with writing down the learning goals for the courses that we teach. I am certainly guilty of that. But I think it's incredibly important. And even if I haven't written them down really well, I have definitely put them in my brain and gave them to the university for compliance reasons, but then changed them as I went along. So there's also a whole bunch of that. But I think that in addition to having them, mandated by your university and put on your syllabus, they really should be things that you're taking, messing up some sort of sound. They really should be things that you're thinking about and using to make decisions in your course. Okay. I'm going to ask you to be a student, right? I want you to be a student in this room. If this content is somewhat new to you, then great, you are already a student in this room. If this content is not new to you, I'd like you to take on the role of a student today and put yourself in the mind of a student thinking about this content for the first time, okay? All right, you had an entire course yesterday. What did you learn? So I want everyone on your own. I'm going to give you a minute and a half. I have a timer. And I want you to answer this question, and then we'll talk about it. You know what? If people want to, I'm never going to stop you from working together. This was intended as an individual thing, but you can absolutely phone a friend. And do you know what happens when a two-qubit system starts to? Well, these are all separate, right? So you can just like asynchronous. All right. Okay, this is wonderful. It has been over 2 minutes, and I'm gonna stop you. Normally in my class, I would not stop you here. If I have students engaging really with the content, I will never stop that. But I'm gonna stop it right now because we have a lot to get through. This is something that I might do on what's called a pre-lecture assignment, which means that I taught this material yesterday, and before the next class, I want to see, did students actually get it? Should I revisit this content? Have they mastered it? What's the deal? So I use pre-lecture assignments before every single lecture. Students actually don't hate it because they know that I look at the answers and I use it to make decisions about the class. I'll tell you a little bit more about the types of questions I put on the pre-lecture in addition to things like this. But first, why don't we vote on our answers? I am a low-tech person. Sometimes I have actual colored voting cards on pieces of paper that my students have, but we don't have those here today. So you're going to vote in the most low-tech way possible with your fingers. So A is 1, B is 2, so on and so on, right? So everybody, tell me what you think. Okay.
I mean, GPT said C.
I would like to thank you for taking the direction of being a student very seriously and doing exactly what my students would do. Okay, so no. I saw a third of you vote. I would like every single one of you to vote. Just in front of you. It can be private. No one else can see what you're writing. You can put it close. And if you really don't know and you're confused, you can show me a 0. Okay. All right. So I've seen some great answers. I would like. Okay. This is no longer a pre-lecture. We've moved into clicker question territory. Now, can anyone tell me why this is a great clicker question but a terrible exam question? Oh, go for it.
It's testing too many things at once.
Oh, well, okay. I'm allowed to do that on an exam. And what?
It's good for a clicker question for the same reason.
Okay, sure. I will accept that. That is not what I was looking for, but I will accept it.
Thank you.
Because there's more than one correct answer. I didn't even know it when I wrote it the first time, and I was writing these answers, and then I thought to after I wrote them out, I thought, wait, there are identical answers here. Can anyone give me a pair of identical answers? C and D, I heard. Also, maybe A and B. Right? We talked yesterday about how a global phase can't be detected, and there's a, yeah, Brian?
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Although they differ by global phase, they are different states, and one is a correct answer and one is an incorrect answer. The fact that they are not physically distinguishable does not make them different.
Brilliant. Love it. These are exactly, okay, so I'm going to repeat what Brian said because it didn't get picked up by the microphone, which is that if I act these gates on that state, I will get one of these answers. I believe it is C. It is C. While C and D are, what are we going to say, will give experimentally the same results. They are technically different states, right? They are, okay, say more. I think that this is going to be a philosophical difference of what does it mean to be a state. Absolutely. So in my class, this might be something that we take up and explore and talk about the meaning of this difference, and that would be a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, in physics, I mean, I completely agree with Brian, and practically they give the same answer, but physically, I think we should treat this one as a different answer, because minus sign may matter if you design something strange, essentially. And actually, we found another answer which is not in the list. We found 0, 0 plus.
Plus? Minus, yeah, okay.
And I think from the point of view of linear algebra, mathematically they are different.
So, yeah, so I think that there are some, I am going to move us on, but I think that we can talk about this quite a lot, right? And there's a lot of richness here to this conversation, and it started with, I don't know, something that seemed like it was not conceptually rich at all, right? This seemed like a pretty technical question that I might ask my students, right? I could absolutely do this with the black and white balls. Yeah, I could do this kind of thing with black and white balls, absolutely. If you want, I can show you what this would look like later. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of what, I added this earlier today, of what I do for pre-lecture assignments, because I think that they're really valuable and you can vary what you do with them. I use them for reading assignments. I have class twice a week, so I will have them do 2 pre-lecture assignments every week. One of those is a reading assignment, where I give them a portion of the textbook to read, and then I ask them these 3 questions, which I got from a physics teacher article from Wendy Adams, which is just brilliant. What did you learn from this reading? What were you confused about in this reading? And what did this reading make you wonder about? What questions did it bring to mind? And I have found these to be so generative for my students. They really do give me really impressive answers that tell me that they read the book. And I didn't have to ask them, what does equation 3.74 tell you about the variable psi or something, right? I asked them, oh, yeah, sorry. No, I'm not. The reason I'm not is because it's worth no points. There's no right answer. And I do read them and often respond to them. So if my student says, what are you confused about? I'd be like, this is a great question. We're going to talk about this next week. Or I'll say, oh, thank you. I'll review this, or I'll give them the answer. Do you know what I mean? So it'll be a little bit of a back and forth. And so because it's not worth any points, they get points for completing it, but there's no correctness. Yeah.
Do you see good engagement with the textbook? Because I feel like faculty I talk to have such mixed opinions. Like some have just given up hope on students ever reading a textbook, and then there's other people like you that fill me with optimism. So,
I love filling people with optimism. I think that my students do engage with the textbook. And in this particular course, so when I use these questions most commonly, it's in my quantum mechanics class. My students end up loving the textbook. They bring it to graduate school with them. They use it to help teach their peers in graduate quantum mechanics. So I would say that, yeah, I think that is engagement with the textbook. Yeah.
When do you collect the information from them?
It is all in our course learning management software system. They have to do it before the class, usually 30 minutes before the class starts, because that's the 30 minutes that I set aside to read them. Yeah. And then, of course, it's just free points. And I always give them like 3 freebies where they don't have to do it, because I don't want people to tell me a sob story about why they didn't get it done. Okay, content questions. Also, you guys know how to do content questions, right? You can write content questions all day. I also use this a lot for course feedback and just checking in with my students to see how they are. So this is a sample of types of questions that I ask them. How confident are you feeling about the material in chapter 2? Because we're moving on now, right, to the next thing. How confident are you? Are there any concepts or examples you want me to revisit in the next lecture? Is there anything I can do to better support you in your learning for this class? This one I found to be really helpful recently. How do you think the homework is? Also, in relation to courses that you expect at the junior level in a physics degree, right? So we talk about those types of things in the pre-lectures. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to move on from pre-lectures now. Okay. Oh, I'm going to teach you some stuff. And you know what that means? I need my notes so I know what to teach you. So we're going to do a little bit of lecture now. And I wrote some things down, so I had an idea of what I was going to do. But I'm going to teach you the way I would teach my class, which is that I write notes on the iPad during class. I don't use slides most of the time. So let's talk about 2 qubits. All right. So do I want a bigger line? I want a thicker line here. So if I'm drawing 2 qubits, I stack them one on top of another in circuit diagrams. I've already introduced circuit diagrams to my students. They know that a qubit goes along a line. And I'm going to give each of these a little label. Right? The top one is going to be psi, and the bottom one is going to be phi. And if I were to write this using Dirac notation, which is my kets, I am going to write, and this is a controversial statement, but I'm going to write it where the top qubit is my left one and the bottom qubit is my right one, and this is different than Tom's book and what other folks do, and it is the same as other books and what other folks do. This is how I grew up, so this is how I'm the teacher today. So this is how we're going to do it. But it's important to note that this really is a choice. Right here. Now, it is a choice that does not matter. As long as I am consistent throughout all of my work, this ordering convention is completely arbitrary. Okay? So we can do everything we do this way, or we could do it another way, and it's going to be just fine. Now, using Dirac notation, this is going to be my top qubit. And this one is my bottom. Now I'm color coding them here because we're going to find color coding to be a little bit useful in a moment. A couple properties about the tensor product, which is this symbol in the middle. It's distributive, right? So we saw this yesterday as well. If I have a 0 state tensored with a plus state, I can write that. I'm going to pull my constant out front. Now, this is the notation that I think is the most confusing for students in terms of figuring out where is the first qubit and where is the second qubit. So I'm going to take my highlighter here, and I'm going to remind you that everything to the right of that tensor product symbol, that was my bottom qubit, right? And so even when I've distributed it out, it's still the second qubit. It's the thing to the right of each tensor product. What you'll find students will sometimes do is they will see this entire second piece, and they'll want that to be the second qubit, right? Which once you know what you're doing, that feels like a silly thing to do, but at the beginning, our students don't know what they're doing, right? They're learning. All right. How are we feeling? Any questions? All review. All right. Yesterday, yeah, sure.
You have 0, tensor, this other thing.
Yeah, the plus state, yeah.
How did you know, so the yellow qubit versus the green qubit?
Yeah,
Why are they in different states? Was that arbitrary?
that was me making an arbitrary choice. Absolutely. So what I did here was I said, you know, let's assume really what I've done on the side here, and I'm going to put it in light, is I'm going to let that first qubit be 0. And I'm going to let that second qubit be this 1 over root 2, 0 plus 1. Right? And then I've just sort of done some math. Right? I just wanted to see what this tensor product looks like when you have a sum happening. Okay. Great question. All right, let's do another quicker question. So here's a 2-qubit state. What is the probability that a measurement on the first qubit will be a 1? I measure the first qubit. I get 0s or 1s. What's the probability? I meant to change this. Left. Yep. Great question. All right, we're going to vote with our hands again. A, B, C, D, E. All right. I am seeing a whole bunch of 3s in the room, and if I look here, the first qubit is a 1. So if I am looking at the first qubit, which is the left qubit, I should say the word left, I am looking at the left spot of each ket. Right? This is something we learned yesterday. I did not teach this to you today. And so I'm going to look and see where's a 1. I see that 1 right here. And so I'm going to take this coefficient and I'm going to square it. Right? That's my amplitude. I square it to get my answer. Okay, next question, same state. Second qubit means right. What's the probability that the right qubit will be a 0? You are all very quick with this because you've all got it, right? This is material that you learned before. You all know it. We feel good about probabilities and interpreting 2-qubit states. That's great. We can move on. Let's talk about gates on 2 qubits, okay? Let's say I have my same circuit that I had before, which wasn't really a circuit at all. It was just 2 wires, right? What if I do a gate on the top one? Let's say I do a Z gate. And I do an X gate on the bottom one. Okay? How would I write the state afterwards? Right? So the question is, what is the state here? And let's go with the convention again that this top one is going to be the left and this bottom one is going to be the right. Although, you know what, if you do it differently at your table, no one's going to stop you. All right. Well, if I had at the beginning, I had psi tensor phi, what I've done here is I've acted a z on psi. So maybe I'll put that in the left part. And I'll put an x on my phi. Does everyone agree? Does that look right? Do I need the thicker pen? Yes. I forgot to switch, sorry. You know, I ask students for feedback every once in a while. What can I do better to support your learning on these pre-lectures? And I asked students about, I don't know, 7 weeks into the semester. And a student said, stop writing at the bottom of the screen because we can't see it. I was like, okay, that is something you needed to tell me day one as soon as you couldn't see something on the screen. You do not need to wait until I ask you. Okay, so this is definitely right. Is there another way I could have written this? Yeah, okay, how else could I write this?
Could have done the tensor of the operators.
Okay, so I think what you mean here is I'm going to do what? Z?
Tensor X.
And then what do I put on the side here?
The original state, psi tensor V.
Ooh, let's fix that mistake there. Psi tensor phi. Yeah. Great. I agree. These are equivalent. And one thing that we can do is I can think about these two gates sort of as a single thing acting on 2 qubits, right? As a single 2-qubit gate. All right, let me ask you a question. Could I write it as this? I'm seeing some heads shaking. I heard it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? Oh, I love it. You said something. Okay, so what she said is z times x is a 2 by 2, right? And that is going to lead me into my absolute next question, right? Which is what is the dimension of this guy? It's a 4-dimensional system, right? Because I have, maybe we haven't done column vectors, or maybe we haven't done the matrix representation yet, but I definitely have 4 possible states, basis states, that could describe this. I have the 0, 0, the 0, 1, the 1, 0, the 1, 1. There are 4 of these linearly independent states, so I have a 4-dimensional basis. And so having a 2-dimensional operator acting on a 4-dimensional state doesn't make sense, right? So this, the answer is no, I can't do that.
Can you also say it doesn't make sense because this says z and x are both being applied to psi and
This means a different thing. Okay, great point. This is not a meaningless expression. This happens to be unequal to what I wrote above. But what would this look like if I were to draw the circuit diagram? Let's draw the circuit diagram for this guy here. I have 2 wires. We're going to say the top one is going to be this one here. Okay. So what gates do I need to add there? A z and an x. And do I add anything on the second one? No, because there's nothing there. I've left this blank. Let's do another clicker question. Oh, that's a brilliant question. The question was sometimes the tensor product symbol, that x with the circle around it, is implied, and we don't write it explicitly. And other times it's not, and it seems like we've just omitted it here, but we implied it, right? It turns out the rule about omitting it only holds for states. You can't do it with gates. If I write zx next to each other with no additional information, it is assumed that those are both acting on the same space, Hilbert space. Okay. Yeah, that's a great question, and something I've actually never thought about before is how we omit the tensor product symbol for states, and we really don't omit it when we're talking about the single qubit gates.
People are lazy, so people skip the tensor product instead. We include this indices subscript.
Yes. I don't want to encourage that kind of sloppy behavior. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to show people what you mean. I'm going to zoom in here, and they might say that this one is on the left or right, I suppose. Left and right here, or 1 or 2. Yeah, and that would take that is non-standard notation, sir. Yeah, I'm gonna call that non-standard notation. Nothing's wrong with it. Nothing's wrong with it.
It's just as much right.
But that's still a matrix, right? Z-gate is 2 by 2 matrix, and X-gate is a 2
Yeah.
by 2 matrix, and then we multiply them, and the result is a 2 by 2 matrix.
Yes, yes, yes. What is okay? No, we're not doing a tensor product. We're doing multiplication. We're doing matrix multiplication. Okay, let's think about this for. This is worth thinking about. This is worth thinking about. Okay, here's an aside. This is unplanned, folks. And this is actually this is the main point of my lesson, so it's great that this is unplanned, is because this is how I think lectures should go. If you have an interactive lecture and you are listening to your students and they are having questions and they are having ideas, it is your job at the front of the room to respond to those in the moment, right? And so, yeah, I feel like this is a necessary thing to do. Okay, all right. It was suggested that we use this language, this notation. And I said, don't do it, sir. And then Brian said, what's wrong with it? Right? I disagree, ma'am. I actually think that this is
Can I ask you what L and R mean here?
left and right. The thing to the left of the tensor product and the thing to the right of the tensor product, the top qubit and the bottom qubit. Yeah? I'm going to color code them, actually, because I think the L was our first qubit, top qubit, left qubit. The green was our right qubit, bottom qubit. Yeah? Okay. There was another question before I answered, or no?
Well, there's this notion of hermeticity and unitarity, and I think strictly use subscript notation. You have to conjugate rather than transformation conjugate.
Okay, let's ignore that for now. But thank you. But let's just not go there. Okay, so if I wrote this notation, if I wanted to expand this out into tensor product notation, if I wanted to do the matrix math that was mentioned here, I can't just do the 2 by 2 z with the 2 by 2 x. Really, what I want here is I want to take this, right? But what does ZL mean on its own? Right? What is the dimension of this operator? I mean, that depends on the size of your system, Brian. You can write, come on up. Come on up. Do we have pens? Yeah, there's some right here. Yeah, grab the blue one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
XR, identity, tensor product of X. And then
That works.
ZL is just multiplication.
With that convention.
Yes. 100% agree. Yeah, that's absolutely correct, right? And so you can, why do I not like this notation? You can absolutely do this, right? Why do I not like this notation? There's some hidden components to it that can be really powerful if you know how to manipulate it properly, but this compressed notation may also lead to some confusion. And so generally when teaching this, I would say that I would err on the side of not using this compressed notation. Although, if that's a skill you really want your students to be able to develop, then absolutely use it, right? Totally your choice. Okay. Absolutely, which actually just is Z tensor X. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to erase, well, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. This was a nice conversation that we just had. So I'm going to take this. Seriously? Now it's copied. Okay, I'm going to put it over here. I am also going to edit this here for a second, because if I leave those subscripts in, then the answer to this is actually yes. But without the subscripts, the answer is no. So we're just going to go back and edit this so that when we look at it later, we're not totally confused. Okay? But we're going to recognize that we could have done it in a correct way up on this path here, right? This is correct. Down here. Okay. But I do really want to get to this question that I put down here, right? And we have this on the other slide now. If I did have this zx psi tensor, what am I doing? What am I doing? There we go. That's better. Which one? We drew the circuit, but I left those boxes blank, right? Which one is it? A or B? 1 or 2? Okay, you are all wonderful, wonderful students. Do you think that you all got it right? The answer is B. Do you all think that this is a thing your students might get wrong? Yeah. Absolutely, right? This is a really, easy thing for your students to mix up, is what is the order of these gates when you turn it into direct notation, when you turn it into an equation. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing, because, oh my goodness, this has been such a great class that I want to get to other things. So I'm not even going to do the next thing. What I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to maybe just give this to you to think about, is we just showed you a 2-qubit gate where we can write it as a tensor product of something with another thing. But the 2-qubit gate you saw yesterday was a C0 gate, arguably the most important gate that you're going to, well, Hadamard's most important, C0 second most important, that you're going to experience in quantum computing. Can you write it like this?
Do you mean what Brian meant by Eleanor?
Yes.
No, that's an abusive notation. That's a tensor product between two tensor products.
Which is exactly why we should not be using this notation. Okay, here we go. Instead, I will use my little highlighter. Really, all I was trying to do was indicate that one was on one qubit and one was on the other qubit. That was the only thing I was trying to do there. But you're right, that was an abusive notation. that was incorrect. Okay, so this is the question that I sort of wanted us to explore. We're not going to explore it, but you can think about it and then talk to your neighbor about it later. Okay. We have a whiteboard activity. We're going to do it. I can't decide. We're going to have enough time. We're going to do it. Okay, so I want you on your whiteboards to draw a circuit that represents this. I want you to think about, is there more than one way you could draw a circuit or another circuit you could do? And what diagrams do you think students might come up with? And I'm going to give us maybe 5 minutes to do this activity. that most of you got through this activity. How many of you picked number 7? I think a couple of groups picked 7. Did you pick it because it was the easiest to convert to binary? How many of you picked 0? No? Oh, excellent. I totally would have picked 0. Okay, so of all of you, how many of you got states that were entangled?
I remember the definition of entanglement, but we can't tell how to apply it as well. We got
I'm not being mean. This is a great question. Some of you were thinking, wait a second, maybe I got something. How many of you got a state that is a superposition? Yeah, everyone should have gotten a state that's in a superposition, right? You have a Hadamard gate in there. There's only one Hadamard gate in there. It's going to be creating a superposition state. No one should have gotten entanglement. Why did we not have entanglement here? I heard some answers. There's tensor products between all of our gates were tensor products of single qubit gates, right? And the initial, so I guess we need both of those pieces, right? I needed the fact that I didn't have entanglement going in, right? And all of the gates that were all acting locally on individual qubits, right? I had no entangling, I had no connection, I had no correlations happening between my qubits. Okay. I'm going to give you a chance to talk to each other again in just a moment, because I want to reflect on some of the things that we did so far. We're going to do a couple more things, but let's take a pause and think about what we did here. I simulated a pre-lecture activity. It wasn't really pre-lecture, but it could have been, right? We talked about the different types of things we can do. We did some interactive lecture. It ended up being really interactive because you guys are awesome. And that meant that it really did, and this is exactly what I was hoping would happen, right, is that we could demonstrate how, like, going off book, right? And I think I said yesterday in response to someone else's question that, like, I leave time open in my schedule, in my calendar of events, to make sure that we have time for these off tracks, right? And sometimes we go into the next topic because this topic just did not generate any discussion with my students. Or they were really tired that day and they just like didn't have it in them. And other days we have an entire class sort of as a choose your own adventure, right? We had some clicker questions. You'll notice some of those clicker questions that I had were pre-decided, right? I had typed them up here. In class, I don't have any slides prepared most of the time, depending on the course, but sometimes I don't have any slides prepared and I'm handwriting everything. I save my clicker questions as images on my iPad, and then I just import them in so I don't have to type them all up.
Do you do actual clickers, or do you skip by with fingers?
I use the voting cards. So at the beginning of the semester, I give my students a piece of cardstock that has A, B, C, D on it. We fold it twice, in one direction and in the other direction, and then they can easily vote with those cards. If they forget them, there's an app on your phone that's just like A, B, C, D, easy voting. Some of them take notes on their iPad and they just write a big letter B on their iPad and show it to me. We use low-tech options in my classroom.
What's the class size?
That's a great question. I have between 10 and 35 in a quantum class like this.
Okay.
Steve Pollack, who also does these activities at Boulder, has closer to 80 to 100. The types of, he uses physical clickers, like actual eye clickers. And he'll do less, he won't have big whiteboards in his room because it's a lecture style seating. So there's some adjustments you have to do based on the size of your room. But I think there are elements of all of this that you can do in classes of any size. Yeah. The interactive choose your own adventure is much harder with 100 students. You have a couple students that tend to be a little bit more vocal than others and they can drive the conversation. One of the things that you really do want to make sure you do is that you are getting a sense of everyone in the room, which is the reason clicker questions are so valuable, is because I do get to see the student who's even quiet in the back and isn't responding. I get to hear what they're thinking. Questions about logistics of performing any of these things? So I want you to just take a minute, and I'll time us so we're just a minute on this. you feel like it felt to be a student in this room? I asked you to do a pop quiz where I was going to ask you to vote on your answer. I asked you to do some collaborative work with your peers. And I asked you to interact with me quite a bit, right? So take a second and think about, how did that feel? And also what challenges might face an instructor when doing this.
I had a great experience, and I want to share it because I hated being put in
Okay,
groups.
I'm going to ask you, I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask you to think silently for a minute first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then we're going to talk at our table, and then we're going to talk as a class. So but I'm so glad you have feelings about it.
Well, I raised my hand and everything.
I know.
I
I know. Yeah, it's my bad for not explaining what we're doing. Okay, that was a minute. A couple of things. A minute of silence in a classroom feels like a lot, right? It can be hard. Why did I ask you to take a moment to reflect by yourselves? Some people think really fast, and they can process these feelings right away. And as instructors, we tend to be happy when someone raises their hand right away. We're like, oh, thank goodness, someone is going to answer my question. Right? Like, I'm going to go to you right away, right? Thank you. I think it's important for us to remember to every once in a while give everybody a chance to process for a minute and then ask, right? I have a colleague who will wait until half the class has raised their hands. Like, who wants to answer this question? Wait until a whole bunch of people have raised their hands and then select someone from there, right? To resist the temptation to just call on the first person that raises their hand, right? Because I do feel relief when someone raises their hand, right? Even though I'm an experienced instructor. Okay, so the next thing I want you to do is I do want you to talk to your table mates about your answers to these questions. How did it feel like? What challenges might face you as an instructor in a classroom like this? So now you can talk to your table mates. All right, let's come back together again. Let's see if there are any comments made at your table that you want to share. And I'm going to make the requirement that you're not allowed to share your own idea, but you have to share something that you thought is share-worthy from one of your peers. This is also one of the strategies to get students whose views aren't heard as often to be heard more, right? Because you get some, maybe they just don't want to speak up in the class, right? And their peer can share their views for them.
I learned something from him. He said that if there isn't that one student who is asking all the questions, he tries to ask the question over and over a different way, and there's still silence, still silence, still silence, and then he says, okay, what if I give you a pop quiz?
Yeah, threatening is maybe not always the best, but it's certainly a strategy, right? It can be hard to get students to feel comfortable speaking in a classroom, and it's one of those things that I think is really hard to implement midway through a semester, right? If your students are used to coming into your classroom and sitting and taking notes, and all of a sudden on day, 50, you decide that it's going to be an interactive classroom, that's probably not going to work, right? There's really something to be said for doing it from day one, right at the beginning, and creating this culture in the classroom, this sense of community where we're all working together, right? And there are lots of strategies that I think other people can share. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question
Please.
on that? So day one, like if you're teaching a new course, and if it's like a new quantum information science course, you're kind of like, there's a lot of new stuff I need to figure out.
Yeah.
And so then to add on like active learning on day one, like he's like, okay, can I really even pull that together when my syllabus is barely together? So do you have any tips for like how do you create active learning when there's not like, I mean, I know you're going to share your resources, but like if we stray outside of those and we're talking about topics where there's no go-to active learning resources, how do we try to do that? Do you have any tips?
Oh, I have tons of tips. Do you all have tips? Does anyone have an answer to this question? Is this an answer to this question or a different comment?
It's actually, he had a really good idea. Because I was pointing out that with the circuitry, you could make it more concrete, right? By using an electrical analog. But he pointed out, use an optical thing
students could do it, yeah.
And if you were using optical, it would be an easy switch when you get entanglement.
Okay, that's a great idea. I'm going to go back to Ben's question, which is, how do you do this from the start, introduce active learning into your classroom when you've maybe never done it before and you don't know what to do, and maybe it's a new class and you're already overwhelmed with all of the content?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, like in physics, intro physics, there's like so many people that put together great resources for physics 1 or physics 2. It's like you can just go Googling and you can get lots of stuff. But when you say like, all right, I want to teach about quantum computing hardware platforms, I don't know, like how do I come up with a clicker question for that? And like that's where it seems really daunting to try to do the same kinds of active learning, but maybe in an area where there just aren't ready to go resources.
So I think that that's a great question, and I have an idea, but maybe Bennett, we can come to you first here.
Well, I think culturally responsive pedagogy, if you ask the students, what in your life relates to computing, or ask a very low-ball question, or ask what are you expecting to learn in this course? What is something you're hoping to walk away from? What do you think is something that is a relevant prerequisite you may have taken? I don't think you have, all that you have to do is succeed in getting students to engage. You don't have to ask a good question to be successful at setting the tone.
I love that. You don't have to ask a good question. The good question, but really, I mean, here, let's go back for a second. I asked you a couple clicker questions. Were these good questions? I'm going to say no. You all got them right? These questions served a purpose. They were like a check your comprehension clicker question, right? You can create these all day long because these are like the multiple choice exam questions you might create, right? Like we all know how to create questions. They might not be brilliant. They might not be good conversation starters, right? So I would say this was a bad question. What was a better question during class? Probably this one. What's the order of these gates, right? This is one where as I was teaching it, I thought, ooh, this is a thing people might get confused by, right? And on the fly, I took that as an opportunity to ask my students their ideas about this thing. And so I think that you can have all of the flashiest materials in the world, and I can have really well-prepared slides with lots of good questions on them and have it be a very uninteractive classroom, right? And so I think it's less about the content you have and more about what you're asking students to do in the moment and how you're responding to them. And I would say that that's the key difference. And that can be hard to develop. I mean, I have an over sense of confidence in front of a classroom. And so I'm not afraid to have someone say, actually, you're wrong, right? Like, that's fine. Oh, tell me. Share with me why I'm wrong. That's great, right? That's okay with me. And that's not for everyone. We all have our own personalities in the classroom.
I was going to say one, I'll call it a lazy professor trick that I use, is to start students thinking about stuff in a different way rather than they're just preparing their brain to fall asleep because that lecture is about to happen, is if you keep track of just news stories, like popular news stories, like how much money D-Wade is worth right now or something like that. And so I keep track, like, before the semester, right, like the biggest thing, the biggest story in that happened during the summer. So even the first day of class, and usually something happened. You just bring up hey, did you guys read that story about that? And even before the class starts, just have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy my classes a lot when the first 5 minutes tends to be a free for all. Hey, did you hear about that story or that story? And it prepares their minds to contribute and stuff like that. So I would say I call it a lazy professor trick. I think it works really well.
Chandra?
I don't know. Another strategy I've heard some faculty use is like if you have a really long homework problem that has parts like A through F, or is really tricky to like set up at the beginning, like working through part A together, and then students can buy into it because they think they're getting like a jump start on their homework. So it's like we've done one part, so you already have a long homework problem written, but like the active engagement in the class is to like get a start on that, and then you keep going out.
I love that. That's a great idea.
So now I wanted to say I hated this when I was a student, and I give this active learning to my students. And I tell them, at least this is your networking. You get to know your classmates. But I hated it as a student, and we are all good students here, and I hated it here except for this exercise. So I wanted to give you credit, but I hated it yesterday. We were trying so hard to get those spiders working. And we didn't get any help, and we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I think when we did quantum computing kit, the kit was malfunctioning, and the instructions weren't given clearly because the guy was on Skype, and we were looking for help, but there was no one to help because it's only one instructor and so many tables.
Yeah, it's a great.
Good God. And so sometimes it's better when everyone is in class and there's that one student who is not afraid to ask questions, but at least all other students get the answer. This is what we're grabbing for your attention. And the reason this one worked right now is that there was one person here who knew this better than the rest of us. So I benefited by being taught by that student. And you also happened to come by and say that's right. And that gave reassurance.
Yeah, I would say that it's really important to make sure that you give appropriate instructions and that the task is at the level that the students are at in the moment. And as an instructor, I would say if you give your students an activity like this, if it's not working, like pivot, right? And make sure that you do something to change the tone of what's happening and to sort of redirect. Because it can go wrong, right? And more often than not, there's studies that show that faculty who introduce some of these methods stop after one semester. And one of the reasons they stop is because they had a bad experience. It just didn't work. And it can take some trial and error to get it right. Okay, one last comment before we're going to move on.
I would like to comment about the lazy professor.
Sorry, I don't mean to use
Oh,
that.
well, no, it's good. See, what I think is if you pay attention to the majors in your class, like if you have a lot of bio majors or something, you can often find news articles or something that will pertain to actually, I mean, it's amazing if you look, pertain exactly to the topic you want to lecture
Yeah.
on, related to their major, and that gets them interested right away.
I'm going to even take that one step further and say that you can pose that to your students and you can tell them to email you an article that they come across that they think might be interesting, and then you can bring it into the classroom and make it their job to do that and find something that's interesting to them, right? Okay, so I do want to get to these last two things in our last 15 minutes, which is group worksheets and interactive homework. So group worksheets, in the physics education research community, we call them tutorials. And they're generally much longer activities that are designed and they're printed out on paper. Students work on them in small groups. Often they take about 45 to 50 minutes. They take almost an entire class period. You really do have to devote to using them. They're extremely powerful at helping students really investigate a topic, right, and really engage with it deeply. I'm not going to have you work through one of these today, but I'm going to show you where you can find some if you're interested in using them in your classrooms. And then I'm also going to recognize that even me, I don't have small group sections in my class. I teach twice a week, right, for 75 minutes each. I can only devote so many classes to handing it over entirely to the students to allow them to work through some of these ideas. And on the most important ideas, the ones I really want them to engage with, I do. I take an entire class period and give them a tutorial to work through. But the other ones, we have translated them into interactive homeworks, and I'm going to show you what I mean by this as well. So the materials that I'm going to show you are on a website called physport.org. Has anyone heard of Physport and used it before? Oh, not as many as you as I want. Okay, this is Physport. This is Physport's homepage. It's primarily for physics, but there's a lot of stuff in there, especially this expert recommendations tab here is going to have a lot of helpful information. So where can I find good questions to use for clickers in my class? There's a whole bunch of questions. How can I talk about equity in physics classes? That's going to translate to non-physics classes too. Best practices for whiteboarding. Hey, we just did some whiteboarding, right? There's a whole bunch of articles written by experts on how to do things in your classes. There's a whole bunch of teaching methods, assessments, stuff about workshops. What you will also find on this is individual curriculum developers have created websites, and this is my website. It's called Adaptable Curricular Exercises for QIS. And so what we have here is we have two different tabs. I primarily teach quantum mechanics classes, and I happen to think that quantum mechanics classes are a really great place to introduce some quantum information into your course, right? So what we've created here is short modules that you can add into a quantum mechanics class if you happen to teach quantum mechanics. I know that there's actually only one table of physics folks in the room, and they all mostly already know about this. Only some of you don't. And then the other side is an intro QIS, right? And so these are topics that we have decided in, well, actually I'm going to go through both of them because I think that this one is useful as well for you all. We've categorized things into 3 topics: qubits and teleportation, quantum gates, entanglement and EPR in the middle, and then some cryptography, which is really just BB84. We have our example. So if you just want to see what I do in my class, you can download all my materials, my lecture notes, my clicker questions, my homework, my syllabus. It's all there. You can take it all and see what I do. If you want Steve Pollock's, Steve's awesome. You should probably take his. No, but you can see all his stuff too, right? We teach at very different institutions. I teach at a primarily undergraduate Hispanic serving institution, and he teaches at CU Boulder, which is an R1 research intensive, more selective institution, right? And our student bodies are different. He has a large class, I have a small class, right? A whole bunch of differences. But what you'll also see here is some lecture notes for faculty. So some of you might find this helpful. Where what we did was here's the tensor products one, stuff that we talked about today. If you just need a tiny bit of a primer on some of the content, you can go here. It's not a textbook. It's meant to be super quick, snappy, just the basics. But it's all there. We also have some sample concept tests that you might use, clicker questions in your classroom related to that content, okay? In this example, we have the same one with matrix notation. And then some instructor notes here on the bottom, like how you could do it. For our material downloads here, oh, I was just logged in. Okay. In order to get these material downloads, you have to be a verified educator with Fizzport. It's very fast. You just use your EDU email address. Basically, they want to make sure students can't get these because we also have exam questions. And homework problems in here, right? So these are really for educators only. But what we have here is I have a whole bunch of clicker questions. We have some homework questions. Normally you would see a preview here if you were logged in. Exam questions, notes for faculty. This is a PDF of those notes from above, and you can download all of them. So we have all of this content for those three areas. In the Intro QIS section, this is really for people who are teaching an Intro to Quantum Information Science course in some way. How did we choose the topics? We chose the topics at the very beginning. We did not go advanced at all. Our goal was to try to get people from different backgrounds speaking the same language. You might have students from a physics background or a computer science background, math, right, wherever, and they all have to get to the same place. So we decided to focus on the beginnings. And so these are the topics that we have. We're going to be adding a couple more in over the next little while. But this is what we have so far. If I go to the tensor products one, what you'll see, okay, what does this topic include? What are the prerequisite knowledge your students should have before you teach this material? Some faculty notes. We direct you to the other instruction information. And then what do we have available? So we have an online activity. We have a paper activity. That's the thing you can do in your class. Print it out on paper, do it in the classroom. And we have an instructor's guide to give you some guidance on what we think students should be thinking about, or where are the hard parts for students and what are the easy parts for students, that kind of thing. I want to take you to this online activity, right? Because this is the next thing that I wanted to share with you that we've spent a lot of time developing. So this is homegrown by a graduate student from CU Boulder, a former graduate student from CU Boulder, who had a career in web development before, or He's a computer science person who was in industry for years and then came and did a PhD and then went back to industry. But he created this website for us, which is really lovely. So you can go to acephysics.net/QIS, and you will get this list of QIS activities here. I'm going to go to the tensor products one, because that's the content we've been talking about today. And what you'll see is you'll get a little, first of all, you'll see this red banner saying you're not signed in. If you want to save your work or you want your students to save their work, you can sign in. We do not even keep your email address. He has fancy hashed it in some way so that we can't even download a list of people. But it does allow the browser to save your work, right? And if you are an instructor, you can sign up your course, and then you can get information about your students' completion of these activities to give homework credit for it, right? So we have that baked in, and you just have to email us to get access, or there's a button on the website. It indicates to students that it's really not about being right or wrong here. We really want to take students on a journey of thinking about these ideas, okay? So we give them some information. We have a pretest at the beginning, and then there's a whole bunch of pages. I'm going to take you to page 3 so you can get a look and see. Here's the first question. What would the following say? This is an activity we just sort of did, right? This is very similar to what we've already done. And so they want you to draw it on scrap paper. And then you have to click a button that says, I drew the circuit. Okay, for the sake of, let's say we drew the circuit. Okay? And then we want you to select all of the correct representations of this circuit. Right? So go through and think which ones, oh goodness, which ones are correct. Now, psi 1 is clearly the top because it's been labeled as psi 1 here. I don't know if I meant to click that. We're going to have to make me think on the top. Z first, then H, X on the second one. That looks good. Anyone else? Is there another one? Oh, the fourth one. What happens if I only get the second one? You've got it. There's another correct answer. This message will disappear if you find it. Oh, well, now I want to find it. There you go. I've got it, right? So there's a little bit of interaction baked in here, but you can assign this for homework for your students. We ask them a question here, is this equation true or false? Right? And so you can feel free to play. It's completely free to use. Go on in and play around with all of these. It can even be helpful for you as you're learning the topics for the first time. Yeah.
So how does instructor know student did correctly or incorrectly?
We do not give instructors information about correct answers or incorrect answers. We will give instructors instructors can get reports on completion. Yeah. And really, this should be giving us, okay, so let me just pick true for both of these. Let me write something in here. They want you to write the output, and then we do have some little symbols here that people can copy and paste to use in. But I say move on. Oh, I'm going to write some stuff. It's going to make me, okay. You're all done, but we haven't checked your answers. We'll show you the answers. So now the student has answered them all. We can go back and go through. Here we got it correct. These were their answers. Oh, look, I randomly got it correct. And then there's some explanation here. Oh, I got this one wrong, right? So then it gives some explanation as well. So it's sort of built in to help them arrive at the right answer throughout. We really meant what we said at the beginning. What you'll notice, so this one we can't tell you whether you're right or wrong because there's going to be some syntax differences and it's hard to parse. So we just give our answer and different versions of what that answer looks like. Here's this last box that people might ignore, but I would like them not to. Now that you've seen our answers, briefly comment on whether they agree or disagree with yours and why. Summarize what you feel like you've learned and or what you still feel confused about. And the goal here, again, we're not grading this. We really want students to just like pause and reflect on their own learning, right? And this is meant to be a learning tool, not an assessment tool. Yeah.
This information the instructors also don't see.
That's correct. Yeah. What I have done on my homeworks, so I have access to the system, and I still don't use the report that it gets me. I will ask my students to do this activity, and then I will say, page 3, question F, tell me your answer. Do you know what I mean? Just as a way of being like, show me that you did some effort, right? And that's how I grade it on the homework. It'll be one of my problem set problems. So then, you know, you can go through. You can also click through the different pages. At the very end, it has a review where we ask them a post-test, basically. And these are often the exact same questions that they had at the beginning, where it was a pre-test. And also, if the student feels really confident on the pre-test, they don't necessarily have to spend a whole bunch of time going through it. The pre-test is meant to have them sort of self-assess and to see where they're at and how much time they want to do it. Ideally, we would love for students to do these in pairs, right, in the help room with their friends. Learning shouldn't be a solo activity. When we designed these, we wanted them to be done in the classroom with people talking to each other, right? And this is just the next best thing we could come up with. So, I strongly suggest you to take a look at these. And I think that's all I wanted to share, which we have 2 minutes left before the break. I feel so proud. I have 2 minutes worth of questions. Any questions before we end?
I had a suggestion. Since you teach both quantum mechanics and an intro to QIS, something you might think about is combining both classes occasionally, because that is pretty good for active engagement. The older students, the more advanced students can teach the
It would be lovely. I actually have some of the students in both courses, actually, and those are really nice to have. A field trip to the intro class.
For the less advanced, they're communicating with near peers instead of
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. All right, thank you all, and I'm around if you want to chat about any of these things.